Good morning, everyone. This is a bit of a tricky moment, so I'm not sure if I'm happy to see so many people in the room or not so happy, because if you're here for this topic, then maybe there's also a little bit of a downside to what you're going through. But today I want to talk to you about how to survive to 25. If you've been to any other conferences, then you've probably heard this slogan: survive to 25, everything is going to be better in 25. So let's look at how you can actually survive to 25. So before I introduce myself, quick question: any clue as to what these two numbers are? Yes. And the other one? It's studio closures, and actually only studio closures in 2023. And this is, I wrote down this number on Friday, so there's a good chance there's actually more layoffs as of this morning, because I think there were a couple more announcements over the weekend. But so this is the scope of the problem, and of course, this is not where you want to be. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why you should be listening to my advice on this topic. So I'm Martin. I've been in games for almost 15 years. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done PR, marketing, I've done business development, I've done operations. And 2.5 years ago, I decided to become a business coach. So now I help people, I help ambitious founders build better companies, is how I usually phrase it. So far, I've helped about 60 leaders to do just that, and I hope to help many more people in the years to come. And through this experience, I've seen a lot of companies on the inside. I've seen how decisions get made, and how to use certain principles to make better decisions based on the context that we're all in. So this is what I want to talk about today. So I know the topic is a little bit dicey, but I tried to make it fun by using lots and lots of memes in order to spice up a little bit. So I want to talk about 4 things. I want to talk about first how we got here, because I think it matters to understand the context that we're in so that you can make better decisions in the future. I want to talk about how we can survive to 25. I want to talk about, okay, so let's say we make it to 25, how can you then use everything you know to make it even better and to make your company even better? And I want to talk about very briefly about what can we actually do as an industry in order to improve, in order to get more sustainable, more healthy, so that we hopefully don't get quite so many dips like the one we're in right now. So how did we get here? It may have come as a surprise to some of you, but actually the signs were there for a very long time. If you look at 2020 to 2022, it's pretty clear that there was a COVID high looking back. Everyone was locked inside, everyone started playing games, all the numbers related to the gaming industry went up, and because of that there was a lot of interest in the video games industry from outside but also from inside. Okay, so now things are happening, the games industry is growing, where everything is really settling down, and incidentally, there was also very low interest rates, so that means it's very easy to borrow money if you are the type of person or the type of company that wants to have lots of money to invest in lots of lucrative projects, which the games industry was looking like at that point. So there was lots of investments, lots of M&A activity, and because of that, teams were set up or being grown in order to accommodate that demand in the market. Then, of course, a little bit of a correction in the markets as of last year. People started coming out of COVID. All of a sudden, people realized, hey, there's life outside of my living room, outside of my my study where I play all these games. Everyone went outside, and actually the numbers went lower than they were before COVID. So they're at about the 2019 level right now, the play numbers. And of course, the interest rates went up. So all of a sudden, there's also it's less interesting to borrow money to invest in games because it's just much more expensive. And then, just between those two things, we actually already have most of the elements, most of the ingredients to predict the shit show that we're in right now. And it's really a combination of things, different elements that either fluctuate up or down, and in a specific combination, you get a lot of knock-on effects. So, starting with up. What is up? More games. We made a lot more games. But at the same time, right now we're seeing fewer players than we were hoping to have. And those players are spending less time playing games, and they're actually also spending less money. So that means that by all metrics that matter, the games market is shrinking right now. It's shrinking as opposed to, or compared to what it was during COVID. And that's a pretty big deal. Then, because the market is shrinking, the perceived risk goes up because you have to launch a game in a very saturated market, and that's risky. And the reward goes down because even if you do have a successful game in that market, because there's so many, the average return is probably going to be lower. There are still, of course, outliers. Helldivers and games like Palworld, they show that you can still have outsized success, but the expected return is lower. Then the interest rates have gone up, which, combined with the increased risk and the decreased reward, leads people to invest less, which is also a pretty big deal. And then, of course, we all know that, on average, development costs have gone up over the last couple of years. And if you look at these three elements, you already have a pretty clear picture of some of the main drivers that lead to where we are right now. Of course, there are more factors than just these three, but if we were to list those, then it would get really conspiracy theory board-like. And these three already do a pretty good job of explaining, because if you look at a shrinking market with fewer investments, so less money coming in, but the costs are going up, if you keep that up for long enough, then one of the most logical points is you get a whole bunch of layoffs. So that is the context for, the broader context for the layoffs. But then it also makes sense to look at, okay, so what is the decision making that is leading within this context to the layoffs? Because not all layoffs are the same. First, one of the more popular reasons, I should say, for layoffs is fiscal reporting. If you're a company and you have revenue and you have costs, and you're projecting that next quarter we're going to be making a lot more revenue, but then it turns out, no, the revenue is actually here. You have a gap between what you said you were going to make and what you actually made. Now you can't do anything anymore about the revenue, but what you can do is you can drive down your costs. And then for a very brief, beautiful moment in time, your books look very pretty for the shareholders. But of course, that's not how you actually create value. It's a very short-term solution that unfortunately is used quite a lot. Next reason is M&A adjustments. There were more M&As, more mergers, more acquisitions, and what we almost always see as a result of M&A is layoffs to combat redundancies. And because we saw more of those, we saw more layoffs as well. You would always see that in any circumstance, but again, we saw more of it right now. Another reason is the closure of non-core units or non-core projects. So what you see when times are flushed, companies get interested in what else can we do. So they set up lots of projects, lots of business units to explore other options. And I'm sure that in many cases they were honestly very excited about setting up those projects and seeing them through. But the very first thing that happens when money gets tight is you cut off all of those very interesting non-core projects that you set up, because it's just not what's going to move the needle for you. So they're the first to go. Then, my suspicion is there's also a class of companies that are seeing all of the movement in the industry and in the market, and they say, well, if all of these companies that I hold in very high regard, if they're firing people, then maybe we should be firing people as well. I'm not entirely sure, but we can just go with the flow, better safe than sorry, and at least we won't be out of line with what the rest of the companies are doing. Then, the quote-unquote best reason to do layoffs is you've actually been running the business as well as you can, but you still ran out of money because you couldn't find new funding, and you just have to let people go. And that really fucking sucks. But if you get to that point, then you better be willing to make that call if the survival of the company depends on it. Now there's one other subcategory of this one, which is companies that have been making shit decisions for a really long time, and they've been they've been flying under the radar, and now they get to a point where, you know what, I can actually put all of those decisions, I can shuffle them into the ground, and I can pretend that actually we're doing all these layoffs because we're hit just like everyone else on the market. We couldn't find money for us, and just move with the crowd and disappear into the wild. So those are, as far as I can tell, the core or the main reasons that people are doing layoffs right now. So we've looked at the context, we've looked at the reasons for doing the layoffs. Now let's talk about how to actually survive, right? That's what we want to know. What do you need? Well, it's very simple, really. More money in, less money out. Bub's your uncle. Of course, there's a little bit more to it than that. If it were that easy, you wouldn't all be here in this room. So what I've put together is 8 principles that are based, that will all lead to more money coming in and less money going out. 8 principles to survive to 25. Number 1, focus on profitability. You might have to pull through to 25, even with all of the noises I'm hearing of, we've turned a corner, there's more money becoming available, deals are being signed. That might all be true, but it might not be true for every company. So if you plan to make it to 25, plan on doing it under your own steam with your own money. So that means focusing on profitability, and usually that means going back to, or if you haven't found it before, defining it, the core of your company, your core business. And one easy way to do that is to use the hedgehog concept by Jim Collins, which means, very simply, you define 3 things. You define what you are deeply passionate about, you define what drives your economic engine, what you can make money with, and you define what you can be the best in the world at. If you can find work, or games, or products, or services that cover those 3 topics, then you're in a very, very good position to make money while you're doing the things that you're good at. Now, things are a little bit rougher right now, so if things get really dire, maybe just forget about the passion part. And if you can get away with it, maybe even forget about the skills part, as long as you can make money, because right now it's all about survival. Second, which may seem like it's going against what I just said, so one is focus on profitability and at the core, and now I'm saying to diversify your income. It's not as contradictory as it seems. So there are different things you can do to diversify your income. What you need to do is look at where your players, where your audience is, and what your core strengths are, and how you can combine them in new ways, so that you can create multiple income streams, so that you're not dependent on just the one game that you're launching, or just the one project that you're doing. So one way to look at this is called the unsolved matrix. And what you can see is that there's 4 quadrants actually of expanding your current repertoire and your current portfolio. So there's the existing market with existing products, that's market penetration. I'm really talking more about quadrant 2 and 3. So if you can find new markets for your existing products, or if you can find new products for your existing audience, then you've got a really good shot at diversifying some of your income, even if it's not diversification in the way that it's defined here, because as you can see, that is the most risky endeavor. If you're moving resources away from either your existing market or your existing customer, you're making, and your existing customer, you're making your life very difficult. So I would stay in quadrant 2 and 3 and focus on getting a couple more revenue streams going. So that's make more money in 2 different ways. Now the other side of that is to manage costs. To make the most of the budget that you have and to make it last as long as possible, you're going to have to be very, very stringent and very critical of what you're spending. So this is different for everyone. There's really no clear-cut, obvious tips. I mean, office space is usually the big one, but they're also notoriously hard to get out of because of like long-running contracts. But the process is really quite simple. So what you do is you take your expenses for the last month or 2, maybe 3, categorize them, and then just be really, really critical about what are we spending that is absolutely critical to the functioning of our team, and what is maybe a nice to have, and maybe a luxury that we can cut in order to make our budget last a little bit longer. So you're gonna have to get real honest with what you're spending and where you're spending it. Number 4 is pay attention to distribution. Now, I do not mean distribution in the sense of, oh yeah, we gotta choose physical distribution or digital distribution and pick a platform. No, I mean distribution, everything that your company is doing to get the product that you've made into the hands of players. So if you really just dumb your company down to 2 things, you make a product and you distribute that product. Everything that is not make a product is distribute the product. And if you're anything like most companies, it's going to be more, most of your activities are actually going to be in the build something side, not as much on the distribution side. But this is actually really important because if you think about all the games that are in the market, it's much easier to come up with examples of average games that had really good distribution, really good marketing, really good promotion, really good visibility, that still sold a lot, than it is to come up with really, really, really great games that didn't sell well because they had poor marketing. So the marketing is much more important, and you all know that, and that is why a lot of you are choosing to go with publishers. But as we all know, not all publishers give each game the love that it deserves, so you're gonna have to take it into your own hands a little bit. So one easy way to look at that for yourself is take everything you're doing, everything everyone on the team is doing, and divide it into just these two categories. Is it something that you're doing to create the product, build the game, deliver the service, anything in that category? Or is it something that you're doing to distribute the game, to get it into the hands of people, to get it seen? Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it influencer reach out? Divide it and just see how the balance stacks up. Again, most of you are going to find that a very, very full, very busy product column, a very, very empty distribution column, and see if you can tweak that balance. Yeah, because your studio cannot survive if you're making fantastic games that no one sees and no one plays. Then, number 5, strengthen your studio foundations. So, by studio foundations, I just mean all the ways in which you set goals, communicate, cooperate, the way your whole team works and the way your company works. If you can work together more effectively, more efficiently as a team, you're going to have a better shot at clearing the finish line to 2025. Now, this is what I do for a living. I can talk a long time about this, and we're not going to have enough time for that today. All the ways in which you can do this, but I do want to share what I consider to be the absolute minimum of what a company or the foundation of a company should be. This is up on my website with free implementation exercises as well, so I'll just quickly touch on what I think are the important things. So one is, as a team, determine what your future is. What is your long-term goal? Where do you want to be, and are you aligned on that long-term goal? And can you translate that into goals for the year so that you have more concrete starting points and everyone knows how they can contribute to those long-term goals? Next up is issues. I really want you to track and discuss your company issues, just company broad, so that nothing escapes your attention on what's going on, which need to be tackled. So you're always talking about what are the blockers to our progress and how do we solve them so that we can actually clear those hurdles and solve those problems. Rocks are just goals, but for the quarter. So do you know what needs to happen in the next 3 months in order to move the company forward? And is everyone aligned on that? And I tell all of my clients, you gotta have at least 3 types of recurring meetings. One is the weekly meeting for the management team. You gotta have quarterly meetings where you review the quarter and plan the next one. And you gotta have annual meetings where you review the year and plan the next one. If you do this, then you've got a really solid foundation that you can build on for years to come. And again, I'll have a QR code at the end that you can use if you want to check this out. Next, grow sustainably, if at all. This unsustainable growth is exactly what got people in trouble during COVID. Money came in, teams scaled up, and then when money dried up, all of a sudden we have teams that really don't have any kind of salary. So ideally, you would only grow what your cash flow can sustain. And maybe if you can get by with the people you have, maybe don't grow at all, because again, you might have to be here for a while with the current budget that you have. Of course, we're in a hit-driven business, so in games, money comes in bursts. But at the very least, you'll want to take a good, hard look at your bank statement and see, okay, so how much money do we have? How long can it last? And if we make choices about hiring new people, what impact does that realistically have on our budget and our run rate? Number 7 on the list, another thing you can do to increase your risk of survivability is to build smart partnerships. You do not have to have all expertise within your own company. It's very possible, and in fact, very beneficial if you can create partnerships with other companies, either to leverage common strengths or to mitigate any weaknesses that you might have in your company. So for example, I know that there's a group of studios that all join together to form the Win-Win Collective, where they can, if I remember correctly, they're all co-dev or work-for-hire studios, and together they can tackle bigger projects than they would be able to on their own, and they can also channel business development processes. So they found a way to work together in a way that will increase their chances of actually getting more projects and getting bigger projects on board and sustaining bigger teams and more people. The last one. Layoffs only if you really, really have to. This is probably the most important line in the talk. So the thing is, a company is only as good as its people. In your people, you've built up institutional knowledge. They have built up ways of working together. They have built up incredible expertise and knowledge in ways that are specific to your company and your types of games and everything that you're building. And when you fire people, you break that. And you do not want to break that because you are interrupting a compounding process. You are ruining the very value that you've built up in your company. Plus, studios have shown that that layoffs actually lead to a lot of hidden costs, so that you lose institutional knowledge, which I already said. Employee engagement usually weakens. You get a higher turnover and you get lower innovation. Now, all of these are not things that we can really afford in the games industry. If you want to make great games, you've got to have high engagement, high innovation. So really, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you fire people without a good reason. Fine, but your money is still running out. How do we solve that? I have some thoughts. One is, before you fire anyone, if you are the founder or one of the leaders of the company, consider lowering your own salary. Usually, you have different ways of being compensated. You may have stock options, so you're going to be compensated in the long term in different ways than the people that only have a salary. So you have ways of making up that difference that your employees just do not have. The other reason is, I really believe in radical responsibility. So everything that happens at your company is your doing. Your employees didn't make the decisions that got you to this point. You did, for better or worse. So to me, it only makes sense that the buck stops with you, literally. So I advise people, look at if it's possible to lower your own salary, if that makes it possible to clear the gap between where you are now and where you need to be in order to get more funding in. Another option is, if you can swing it with your team, lower all salaries. If lowering all salaries for a brief period would make it possible to carry the whole team into a richer period, into a period with more cash, then it is also something that, to me anyway, seems much more preferable than firing a whole chunk of your team and then having to make do with all the consequences that that entails. Fine. Maybe this is something you want to try, maybe not. Maybe you still have to fire people. In that case, two things I want to say about that. If it comes down to it, just like the profitability part, focus on the core. So focus on those parts of the company that are crucial, absolutely crucial, to keeping the company in play, keeping it alive. Outside of that, you'll have parts that are maybe not as crucial. If you absolutely have to fire people, probably you should be looking at those areas, the non-crucial parts. Yeah, so sometimes those are parts where maybe you've set up a couple of projects or some off-the-books projects where people are just doing some game jams or trying to figure things out. Those are where you want to move resources away from first. because right now you do have to worry about how much cash you have because it's all about surviving. And the next thing is, when you finally have to do this, if you have to do this, just be a fucking human about it. You're firing real people with real lives who maybe, moved heaven and earth to work for your company. They have real investments. So just act like you're actually working with a human being and you're talking to them as a person and letting them go, and try to make it the best possible version of a layoff. It doesn't have to be any worse than it already is. Plus, it's literally the least you can do if it gets to this. So that's 8 principles to survive to 25. Focus on profitability, diversify your income, manage your costs, pay attention to distribution, strengthen your foundations, grow sustainably, build partnerships, and no layoffs unless absolutely necessary. Now, that's how to survive until 25. Now it's 2025, and you say, okay, I have now a solid foundation. How do we turn this into more? How do we get back to that profitable period? Good news, it's the same principles. Because really, these are just good principles for bootstrapping a company. The only difference is, when you're in a period with more cash available, with more options available, you can afford to loosen some of these principles and to stray from some of these principles if and when the right opportunity presents itself. Because the whole thing is, when you stray from these principles, you make yourself more dependent on external parties. If you take money from external parties, then you're moving away from that very self-dependency. So you absolutely can, but you have to make the decision, is this worth what I'm giving up for? And honestly, if everyone followed this, we wouldn't have all the excesses in the industry that we had. There's good reasons for investments, but not everyone needs it, and if you can do this, it's much, much safer. So, that's what you can do, but what do we need in the industry? What can the industry do? What types of things do we need to tackle in order to create a better industry that will make it actually easier for you to run your company in a way that's not as dependent on outside money? So the main thing is that right now we're functioning in a very hit-driven, winner-takes-all scenario. And a lot of people are talking about how that's the main thing that needs to change, and we need to move away from that. So the 3 core things, in my perspective, that need to change to do that is, we'll need new business models, because the ones we have right now have all calcified into a version where there's already big players in most of the platforms, in most of the markets, and all of the resources flow to them, and it's much harder for smaller companies and smaller entrants to get a piece of the pie. So we need new business models that equalize that a little bit again, because we haven't really seen a lot of new business models for a while now. We need new funding paths. Right now, it's either angel, it's a VC, or you're going to have to bootstrap, and it would be amazing if there were alternative funding paths that sort of sit in the middle, that fill the gaps where companies that don't qualify for VC funding, or don't have the want or the need to grow 100 or 1,000 times, can still get access to funding if they have a really good idea for a game or for a product or service. And the other thing is, we probably need to curb the development costs of these games. They've ballooned, especially in triple or even quadruple A. It's just, games have become too expensive. The unit economics don't really work anymore. You need increasingly huge audiences in order to make it work. It needs to come down a bit so there's more parity between the growth of the cost and the growth of the overall market. And the good thing is, as far as I can tell, we're already seeing the signs of the first steps toward these 3 things. And if this happens, that will make it a lot easier for you to focus on these things and to grow a self-sustaining, healthy company using these 8 principles. And then it's up to you, and you just have to do it.